reason and true religion, a real message from God. But reason is something with which Allah has endowed every human being. And we use this reason in our daily life, all of us. So we use reason all the time.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming to the podium Dr. Jaafar Idris. Dr. Jaafar Sheikh Idris is considered one of the few Muslim scholars of this era who comprehend the knowledge of Islam and Western ideologies. And I'm honored to share the stage and be asked to introduce him. He has authored many articles and research papers, and he has visited many countries around the world where he lectured in both Arabic and English. Dr. Idris was born in 1931, the city of Port Sudan, Sudan. He grew up here where he completed his elementary and secondary school. In addition to the modern school system, he studied Quran in traditional Quranic schools. He also studied fiqh, hadith, and the Arabic language under traditional teachers in the city, and he studied Aqidah with Ansar al-Sunnah group. After he joined the University of Khartoum, where he completed his education, he traveled to London for his postgraduate studies. He obtained his PhD from the University of Khartoum and the University of London in 1970. The topic of his PhD thesis was the concept of the casuality in Islam. His professional teaching and experiences include, and the list is long, so I'll only name a few. He has served as the chairman of the founding council of the American Open University. He is a professor of Islamic Studies departments of Aqidah, Dawah and Information at the Imam Muhammad ibn Saud Islamic University in Saudi Arabia. He has lectured at many universities, academic institutes, and Islamic centers in many parts of the Islamic and Western worlds, and he has also participated with research at many different conferences around the world. There are many published and unpublished articles, papers, and pamphlets in Arabic and English of Dr. Jaafar Idris. Some of the published English ones are, and I'll only name a few, Islamic Social Science, The Islamic Way of Developing Nations, The Islamization of the Sciences, Its Philosophy and Methodology, The Attributes of God, An Islamic Point of View. There are also many articles in different magazines as well as papers presented in many Islamic conferences, but they, however, were not published. Dr. Jaafar Idris, speaking on the subject of reason in the true religion. Dr. Jaafar Idris.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا ثم أما بعد. My talk today is about reason and true religion. By true religion, I mean a religion that is a real message from God that was conveyed or revealed to a true prophet. And reason, I will explain the meaning of reason, inshallah, but reason is something with which Allah has endowed every human being. And we use this reason in our daily life, all of us, in our relations, when we do commerce, in our factories, so we use reason all the time. So it is impossible for a God who endowed us with that reason to give us a religion that is not compatible with it. Because we use this reason in our daily life to judge whether something is true or false, whether something is good or bad. This is the criterion by which we judge things. So if the religion he reveals to his prophets was not compatible with reason, then we would say it is false. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. But we must be clear about what reason means. It is not just an idea that occurs to you, that you say this is the rational thing, or it is not just an idea, it is not just your whims. Reason, I give you some of the characteristics of rational people. And the characteristic or the standards by which rational people judge matters. And you will find when you read the Quran that these are the standards by which the Quran itself judges whether something is true or false, good or bad. The first criterion is that of consistency. By consistency, I mean that if someone makes two statements that are contradictory, he says something is the case, something is not the case, people usually do not make these statements just one after the other, because that's very clear that no one says, I came, but I didn't come. But people can make contradict themselves when you start by saying something, then you say some other things, then you forget what you said at the beginning, and you make a statement that contradicts the first one. Someone comes and tells you, well, this second statement contradicts the first one. And if you are honest, you would say, yes, I confess this is a contradiction, so this cannot be accepted. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that one of the tests that you should use to judge whether something is from Allah or not, to look for contradictions. If there are any contradictions, then this means that this is not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Quran, وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Had this Quran been from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would have found many contradictions therein. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not only saying that there are no contradictions in the Quran, but he's saying that no book the size of the Quran, no book that tells you about what the Quran tells you, no book that has been revealed in the course of 23 years will be immune from contradictions if it were made by a human being. So the fact that the Quran, there are no contradictions in the Quran, is itself the proof that it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, a rational person accepts the testimony of senses. A rational person would not say, see something, but say, no, I don't accept that fact. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took to task some people whom he said would do things like this. وَلَوْ نَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ كِتَابًا فِي قِرْطَاسٍ فَلَمَسُوهُ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ لَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا سِحْرٌ مُبِينٌ. Even if these people are irrational, because even if we sent down from the sky a Quran in something physical, and they touch it by their own hands, they would say that this is magic. So this means that they don't accept the testimony of the senses. We accept the testimony of the senses, and that is why we go by the testimony of the senses in deciding whether this is Fajr, whether now it's time for Maghrib. Also, a rational person accepts a logical conclusion. If you say, this is premise 1, this is premise 2, and these 2 or 3 lead to a conclusion, then a rational person accepts the conclusion. When some people said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they denied the Quran, and the reason for that was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never sent any book to anyone. And these people were Jewish. So the Quran said, then who sent the book to Moses? You see, this is a contradiction. If you say that God sent a book to Moses, then you cannot say Allah never sends any book to anyone. And there are many arguments in the Quran like this. Also, rational person, and we in our lives do this. We judge similar things similarly. Similar things similarly. This is only, even children can know this. If children are examined, sit for an examination, and 2 or 3 of them give the same answer, but one is given a prize and the 2 are not, they would come to the teacher and say, well, my answer is just like the one whom you gave the prize. Why don't you give me a prize also? See, this is something, this is reason. This is something with which Allah endowed someone. And it is on the basis of this that what we call ijtihad is made.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Yusuf Estes, and you're watching Peace TV.
A friendly message by Dr. Zakir. Way to salvation.
The way to salvation has been prescribed by our Creator in His last testament, the glorious Quran, in Surah Al-Asr, chapter number 103, verse number 1 to 3. Wal Asr, by time. Innal insana lafi khusr. Indeed, mankind is in loss. Illa allazina amanu, except those who have believed. Wa amilu salihat, and done righteous deeds. Watawasaw bil haqq, and advised each other to truth. Watawasaw bil sabr, and advised each other to patience. There are minimum 4 criteria required for any human being to enter Jannah, that is paradise. These are Iman, that is faith, Amal Salihat, that is righteous deeds, Watawasaw bil haqq, that is advising each other to truth, that is Dawtul Islam, calling people to submit to God, and Watawasaw bil sabr, advising each other to patience. Its significance has been emphasized by Imam Shafi, who said, if people were to ponder on the surah, it would have been sufficient for their salvation.
Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
Let me remind you that the glorious Quran is not a book of science, S-C-I-E-N-C-E, but it is a book of signs, S-I-G-N-S. It's a book of ayats.
How much time do you spend reading your Quran every day? How much time do you spend in Salah?
If you want to be the best, you carry out the work of da'wah, you become the best.
Allah does not count the number of times you repent. Allah looks at the quality of your tawbah and not the quantity of your tawbah.
If you are able to seek knowledge and you choose not to, you carry the full sin.
Islam came to establish a civil society.
This material world is nothing but a test.
This Quran is a miracle of miracles. It's a miracle of all times.
Islam in Focus. Next on Peace TV.
What is ijtihad? We see a judgment in the Quran that this should be forbidden. Then we find something that is the same as the things, or has the same effect of the things that Allah said haram. So we judge this to be haram, even if that particular thing is not mentioned in the Quran. When Allah says about khamr, khamr is forbidden. Why is it forbidden? Because it intoxicates. Now we find something that is not, that we don't drink, something that we swallow, or something that is given as an injection or so, but it has the same result. It intoxicates. So we say that this is haram. Why? This is based on the rational principle that similar things are treated similarly. And this kind of argument is used in the Quran in many verses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the people at the time of the Prophet to see what happened to the people before them. Why do we read history? What benefit do we get from studying history? Because similar things are treated similarly. If you do the same thing that some earlier people did, then we must expect the same result as they had. That's why the Quran says, أَكُفَّارُكُمْ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أُولَٰئِكُمْ? Are your kuffar better than those kuffar before them? If this happened to the earlier kuffar, it will happen also to you as kuffars. Also, moral arguments. A rational person accepts moral arguments. One of the moral principles is that a person should not say something and do something else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this as a person like this as being irrational, a person who has no senses. أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ? Do you tell people to do good and forget to do it yourself while you are reading Al-Quran, the Kitab? Don't you have any sense? You see, no one who has sense, who reasons, will act like this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another verse, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ? Why do you say what you don't do? This is indeed hurtful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are some of the examples. We find, and unfortunately, that many Muslims have been influenced by people of other religions in thinking that there is a problem or there is a contradiction between reason and revelation. And they think that you should not judge revelation by reason, or that there can be something that is not rationally acceptable in religion. And they say that you must accept it on faith. You see, our faith is not incompatible with our reason. That's why I looked into the Quran for so many years and collected all the verses in which the word aql, you see, the word aql is the word that is used in the Quran for different senses of reason. It is sometimes used in the sense of understanding, sometimes used in the sense of judging rightly, sometimes used as the examples which I have just saw. So the word aql, and I looked into the Quran, I found that nowhere in the Quran is it mentioned that someone deviated because he followed his reason. In fact, the Quran describes those who don't believe as irrational, لا يعقلون. Always in the Quran, the irrational are acquainted with people who have no faith. And again, I don't want to go into the details. When you read the Quran, inshallah, you pay attention to this. Look for the word. Don't just depend on the translation, because sometimes translate the same word in different, they give the same Quranic word by different words according to what they think is the context. And that does not help you to see the relationship between these two verses. So it will help you, even if you don't understand Arabic, to see what Arabic word is used. And then you can see that the relationship between these many verses, that the word aql is used here, ya'qilun is used there, and so on, irrespective of what translation. So I found no verse in the Quran which says that someone deviated because he followed his aql or his reason. Now, many religions, this is perhaps the best evidence that there is no contradiction between Islam and reason. Many religions, and even some ideologies, which are non-religious, ask you to start by accepting the foundation of that religion. And if you say why, they tell you, well, this is the religion. This is something that has to be accepted on faith. In the Quran, it is not like this. In the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the fundamentals that the Quran gives us reason and evidence, rational arguments and evidence for the truth of the fundamentals of the religion. But it doesn't do that with what is based on that faith. Because if you accept the fact that the Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you accept the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing and that He is merciful, then if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you not to eat pork, then you don't need to know why I should not eat pork, because you trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the Quran gives you reasons, rational arguments for accepting first that there is a creator. If someone says, I am an atheist, I don't believe in God, the Quran gives him an argument for the existence of the creator. If someone says, yes, I believe that there is a creator, but I don't know why he alone should be worshipped. Why don't I worship some other minor gods? The Quran gives him reason why he should not do this. The Quran gives reasons why should Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have the attributes that the Quran imputes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and why he cannot have some of the attributes that some people say. For example, why shouldn't Allah have children? You see, it is not only, by the way, the Christians who say that Jesus is the son of God. Even the Arabs, before the Prophet ﷺ, many of them used to believe that the angels are the daughters of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this cannot be the case. And it gives he gives many arguments for the truth of this. He says, for example, that the argument is like this. If you believe that Allah is the creator, then it is impossible for him to have children. Who are those children? If they are his creation, they are not his children. You cannot be a creator and a father at the same time. You don't create your child. So if it is your creation, it cannot be your child. Also, there is an ayah in the Quran which says, how can Allah have a child seeing that he has no spouse? A father does not give birth to the child. It is the mother who does that. And if you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no wife, then you cannot say he is a father. Now, some people, when we argue with them about this, they say, you are taking the word father and child also in the literal sense. We don't take that in the literal sense. I say, okay, give me the non-literal sense. I will not judge you just by the words. I will judge you by the senses that you give to those words. And no one has, until now, succeeded in giving us a meaning or a sense of the word child and father that is not really inconsistent with the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.